Welcome to Soul Elevation, guiding your ascension to new heights. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin, and today's episode is truly extraordinary. If you've ever been drawn to places like Stonehenge or Avebury, or felt the mysterious pulse of sacred sites, this conversation will absolutely light you up. I'm joined by Maria Wheatley, an internationally recognized expert in dowsing, earth energies, and the hidden wisdom of the ancients. She lives near Stonehenge, surrounded by chalk horses carved into the hills and ancient energy lines that speak to the soul. In this conversation, Maria shares jaw-dropping revelations, like the healing frequencies emitted by standing stones, how specific earth currents run beneath our homes and can either nourish or drain us, and the real story behind elongated skull beings who may have been priestesses and wisdom keepers from a forgotten civilization. We also explore what ancient sites like Malta and Chaco Canyon were really built for, and it's far deeper and more multidimensional than most people realize. Maria Wheatley is a second-generation dowser, author, and one of the UK's foremost experts on earth energies, ley lines, and ancient wisdom traditions. She is the director of the Avebury School of Esoteric Studies and has authored several books on dowsing, earth energies, and past life recall. Her work explores how we can interact with the land to access healing, expanded consciousness, and deep spiritual insight. You can learn more about her work at theaveburyexperience.co.uk. This episode is a profound invitation to remember how alive and intelligent the earth truly is, and how our ancestors knew how to work with these natural forces to raise consciousness, promote healing, and deepen connection with the cosmos. And before we dive into this episode, I want to invite you to explore the beautiful array of resources waiting for you at karagoodwin.com. From my book, Your Authentic Awakening, to powerful free meditations, my Learn to Meditate course, and even personalized guided meditations crafted just for you. There's something there to support you, no matter where you are on your spiritual path. You can also sign up for my upcoming summits and workshops to connect with like-hearted souls and expand your consciousness in real time. And now, enjoy this episode. Well, thank you, Maria, so much for being here. I'm really excited to have you on the Soul Elevation.
Yes, well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
And tell us, before we get started, we were just talking before we started recording about where you're joining us from, which I find fascinating.
Yes, I'm in the middle of a megalithic capital. I'm about 40 minutes from Stonehenge, that needs no introduction, and I'm about 20 minutes from the world's largest stone circle called Avebury Henge, and I live in a 12th century market town. I feel truly blessed.
Wow, you are blessed. That's amazing. I was also sharing that the first time I went to England back in, I think it was 2001, um, I one of the first things I did was go to Stonehenge and Avebury. And I didn't really know why. I hadn't had my spiritual awakening yet. That was many years to come. But I mean, of course, I'd heard about Stonehenge from the time I was young, but Avebury was brand new to me, and nobody was there. I mean, it was just like there's no ticket booth. It's just
No.
there. And there's a chalk horse, like a big chalk horse on a hill. Is that nearby?
Yes, we have several white horses carved into the hillside because just below the grass in the county in which these places are, you have chalk bedrock. So you can easily carve the hillside and chalk will be exposed. So there's several in Wiltshire, but the most famous is called Uffington White Horse, and that's in Oxfordshire, not too far away.
Mm. And those they know who created those, or are those mysterious as well?
One is mysterious. It's probably being carved in the late Bronze Age. So that's, hundreds and, well, it's about 2000 or so years ago, thereabouts, could be even older. The other white horses, we know who and when carved them because they're about 200 years old. So you've got one about 2000 years old and some that are 200.
Well, those are also just amazing because you see them from a distance and you can see what they are. but it's hard to imagine like being up close and actually creating them because you don't have the perspective to, when you're up close to something, it's hard to have that perspective of what you're making as you're making it.
Mm.
So it's really amazing. Well, I'd love to start by talking about your fascinating work as a dowser. Please explain, let's start with what dowsing is and how it became a central theme to your work.
Well, a lot of people associate dowsing with water divining, finding wells and finding underground streams. And that is true. I use dowsing to find invisible earth energies that underpin the design of ancient sites, whether that's the pyramids of Egypt or Stonehenge. And I also use dowsing to create a relationship between myself, the sacred site, and the Earth Mother, because at the end of the day, the earth energies are an expression of her. Think of them as veins or arteries and lines and very sacred patterns that are spiral in shape or circular. That's what I look for at ancient sites. These it's like a language of Mother Earth because some energy patterns that she emits are healing, some are soothing and calming and relaxing, and others are quite energetic. So I think the ancient priesthood knew where these energies were and placed certain stones or structures and constructs above them so they could utilize the energy emissions. And that's where dowsing comes in.
Okay. And so are you using for the physical act of dowsing, are you using like the copper rods?
Well, to be honest, I'm so familiar with the energies now that I don't really need dowsing rods, but everybody expects me to hold dowsing rods, and that's what I teach. So it's good to have it as a backup as well to do reference to. So yes, I do use copper rods, but I can just use my hands and my body and relate to Gaia's energy patterns that way because I've had a 35-year relationship with Gaia now, so I'm very familiar with the good energies and the not so good energies that she emits and utilizing them. Like I said, if the ancients were doing this, like at places at Stonehenge, and you've been there and you've been to Avebury and you can feel the energy as you're walking around the site, it's literally that strong. And that's where I think, well, if the ancients were utilizing that, because some are so beautiful and healing, and especially the megalithic energy, the energy emissions standing stones emit, then we can utilize that in our homes. So, for example, I've got a female earth current in my home, and that's my relaxation zone. Avebury has a huge female earth current called Mary, and many other smaller female currents besides. So that's what I mean. I look to the ancient past and think, how can I teach my students to utilize this energy in their own homes, offices, and workspaces?
And so you have said that you are near these monolithic sites and these ancient sites. So is that why there's that female earth energy in your space because you're in this hub of the energy, or are these everywhere?
Absolutely, Cara, you've hit the nail on the head there. Yes, they're everywhere. They interlace the planet. Okay, they're not going to be as big as you get at Stonehenge or Avebury. They can be up to 40 feet wide. But in all probability, you could have them in your home or your backyard or your garden, as we say over here, to be 2 feet, 3 feet wide, realistically. So, yes, you can find these energies everywhere. And I see them as a gift from Gaia. So if we have an overactive child, for example, just to put it into what we can do with these energies, well, then that's a great place for them to relax and calm down and be soothed. And we can also meditate above that, use divination, be that runestones, tarot. It tunes us in to that kind of divine feminine side as well. So I see earth energies as being a part of my daily life, not just going to Avebury, because I know, Cara, not everybody, you're blessed that you've been, but not everybody can go to these sites. So how can we utilize what the ancients were doing in our modern day, everyday life?
Wow. And so what is it like for you when you're tuning in? So tuning into this feminine energy in your home, are you feeling like a tingle? Do you feel a rush? Do you feel like, how is it? How do you divine it compared
That's
to the
brilliant.
rest of your
That's
home?
Absolutely, that's a wonderful question, and one that many of my students ask as well. So that's perfect. Well, when I first started dowsing, I would use my copper dowsing rods that we said earlier to find the earth current. Then you kind of stand on it, interact with it. How does it make me feel? What kind of earth energy signature do I get from this particular energy? And in all probability, if you have that feeling further on down the line, so to speak, you will find an earth current. But even with dowsing rods, it's very, very simple to find earth energy currents, be that male, female, or hermaphrodite. Some contain both and they have that perfect balance. And like I said, some are for healing, relaxation, divination, the list could go on a little bit. But that's how we can find it easily with copper rods, then identify how it makes my body feel, and then go out and find them with or without rods.
Beautiful. Well, I have a place in my backyard, and I have a tiny backyard, but I have a dog that will run the infinity symbol. She'll do like this long figure eight. She just gets really excited, and but it's hysterical to me to watch her do this figure eight, this infinity. And I wonder if is that any sort of do animals perceive these? Do they do any signs of like, could that be that she's tuning into some sort of energy there?
Absolutely. Dogs love positive earth energies. They really do. Cats, on the other hand, shy away from them. They like toxic, geopathic stress. That means negative earth energy in a nutshell. Okay, that's geopathic stress. Horses and animals like cattle and sheep, they will follow what's called track lines in the landscape. And so, yes, they're utilizing earth energies because we see in fields where sheep have walked or where old pensioner horses stand. That is going to be good earth energy, just like what your wonderful dog spinning out the infinity symbol. She's probably attracted to some really good earth energy there.
Mm. Now, it's curious that you say that cats are attracted to the negative energy. What do you make of that?
Well, it's what been well known rather ever since a doctor called Dr. Kathy Batchelor researched 11,000 homes across Europe for geopathic stress. And what she concluded alongside other doctors, and I'm talking MDs that use dowsing to see where safe places were to sleep and to work because there are toxic earth energy grids. One's called the curry net, and underground water that is called groundwater. That's water that's fallen from the sky and replenishes the underground streams. That's what cats are attracted to, that type of negative earth energy. And for us to sleep above or to work above, if you've got your laptop in the same place hour after hour, then that can induce particular illnesses and disease within us. And that's what she discovered. And she was the world's best, and I followed in her footsteps when I house heal or do remote dowsing for people just to check that they're in a safe place. Because there are geopathic stress symptoms. You would be grinding your teeth, waking up feeling fatigued, and other symptoms beside. And she catalogued all of these. And remarkably, she also discovered that where children were placed, if they were on the curry grid or the curry net, as it's often called, they wouldn't be able to retain the facts about the lesson. They wouldn't be able to concentrate on the lesson. So really, we're interacting with Gaia's energies all of the time, but some are geopathic stress, and that's what cats and ants and bacteria and parasitic plants are attracted to.
How interesting. Wow. Well, it makes me wonder if the cats are doing some sort of work, like when they purr, if they're at that site, or I don't know. That's really interesting.
Well, it's where a cat will go by itself. So if you've got
Mm.
a cat at home and obviously it's bouncing up on your lap for fussing, that's not going to be anything to be concerned about. Certain trees like particular types of earth energy, for example. So if you're out in the countryside and you see an old yew tree in England or a hemlock tree in the US or eucalyptus tree in Australia, then that's going to be a very healing source of earth energy. I've measured that. It's a beautiful frequency. So trees, I could decode the landscape without dowsing just by looking at how animals behave, what sort of trees and shrubs and berries or fruit trees are growing nearby, because all of that likes particular earth energies. Now let's put that in the modern world. Okay, the ancients knew this, and it's sort of been widely documented by doctors across Europe. We can start planning how to do our gardens with earth energy. Do you see what I mean? It's not just about kind of living in harmony with the earth energies. It's about utilizing them to grow food above so that we don't have to use harmful chemicals that are toxic really to Gaia. Nobody really wants to use nitrogen or Monsanto, I wouldn't have thought, except those that sell them. And again, we can utilize all of this information and live in harmony with the earth.
Oh, wow. Well, talk about the intelligence of the energy because I think it can be easy to think about it like we're dowsing, we're just kind of finding um, this energy that's just always there. But when you're talking, I'm perceiving like a communication, not just that you're picking up on this dumb current, and but that it's talking back to
Yeah.
you and it's seeking you out and it wants to have a dialogue. But maybe I'm just projecting. Do you like how do you perceive it? Is it more of a dialogue or do you feel that you're just reading it or does that even make sense?
It makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. And I know that I'm talking to someone very aware when you're asking questions like this. It's beautiful. Yes, it's about a relationship. It's about, say, we talked about female earth currents. It's my relationship to that aspect of Gaia. And it's a bit like getting to know a friend. There's going to have to be trust involved. So the first time you interact with earth energy, especially if it's very, very deep yin water, that's water born within the earth, independent of rainfall. I coined that phrase about 20 or so years ago. That deep, deep, deep underground water that is very, very pure has a memory. It's like the Akashic record of place. So when we interact with these particular types of earth energies that are water based, very, very deep, you wouldn't well bore it. It would not be viable, but it will remember you. And water calls to water, just like a spring goes to the sea eventually through a river to the mouth, to the sea. Water inside of Gaia will seek out other water. So when you introduce yourself to that consciousness, the earth will remember you. So make it a really beautiful experience the first time that you introduce yourself to water energies or earth energies. And then, just like getting to know a friend, they trust you. And then once they trust you and they know that you come in peace from the heart mind or from whatever beautiful part of your aspect self that is, then that is a beautiful relationship where Gaia will start communicating,
Mm.
to you. And that can be quite profound, and it can be very healing. And also with the underground yin water, that water that is really very beautiful. It's very, very healing. And what are we? We're contained of water. And so I've worked with that type of water for many years in the sense of let's cleanse my body water from inside out. And that also replenishes our body water by interacting with Gaia's inner waters. So we can use earth energies as well and work with them hand in hand and heart to heart to heal ourselves from the inside out. So earth energies have many applications.
Mm. Oh, that's beautiful. Now, you talked about where you are geographically located as we're recording this, near Avebury. And and not far from Stonehenge. And you've done extensive research at these sites and other sites around the planet. These sites are, for many people, shrouded in mystery. What has your research revealed to you in terms of their purpose in antiquity and now? Um, what have you found?
What I discovered was with places like Stonehenge and Avebury, they're built in different phases. So we think of Stonehenge and we all have that iconic image in mind, don't we? The lintels, and it's iconic and needs no introduction. But the first phase of Stonehenge was very different. Like the first phase of Avebury was just stone settings, no stone circles. So if we went to Stonehenge phase one, you'd have a massive chalk bank, literally like a wall. I always say, imagine a circular wall, and inside of which you have 56 blue stones that were imported from Wales. That was a lunar stone circle because it faces lunar alignments. It could reflect the light of the moon that targeted particular stones in like a very subtle light beam. So that was used at night. And because it's a lunar stone circle, probably by the priestesshood, would have led the ceremonies at places like Stonehenge. And what I also discovered was they had elongated long skulls. They were a long skulled, long lost civilization. And I found what I believe is the Stonehenge Queen, who had a very extended skull going out this way, so to speak. And I believe that these people constructed the first phases of which were used by the priestesshood. And then later they became aligned to the sun, which became associated to the masculine. And so we have moon feminine in its threefold aspect, and we have solar, which is more masculine. And these monuments were changed. They were changed from the predominance of lunar sightings to solar. So I perceive an ancient culture that was used in Stonehenge for many different things, divination, for example, and for healing, because the stones do emit healing sound frequency that I've discovered recently. So they are multifaceted places that can be adapted for many different types of ceremonies, for many different types of things, from healing to divination, depending on where you are in the monument. And our ancient ancestors knew exactly what the stones were emitting. They knew exactly the healing places. And just like acupuncture, they would put a stone like a needle into that meridian line, and that draws the energy up. And that's what standing stones do. They enhance and transmute earth energy. So put a standing stone into earth energy, it starts to transmute it, and it has emissions that we have recorded, so it can change earth energy to aerial energy that goes across the ancient site, of which I have recorded on numerous occasions.
Wow. So when you talk about it changing, transforming from a lunar to a solar, temple, for lack of a better term, um, do you think that that's related to the changes of the planet? So how the planet goes in cycles and then the constellations change and the sky, kind of changes thousands of years upon thousands of years? Or do you see that more as like the patriarchy coming in?
Both in a way, because yes, this background of the stars moves about 1 degree every 72 years. So over a prolonged period of time, with the precession of the equinoxes, you're going to get very different constellations at particular points in the ecliptic plane. So I think, yes, I think that would have definitely enhanced places like Stonehenge, because what I did discover at Stonehenge at the zenith of phase one, I've just been talking about phase one, that 56 blue stones in a very wide stone circle, at the center of that, at the spring equinox at midnight. And I believe that these temples were used at night because they were looking at the moon in particular positions. There was a constellation there called Corona Borealis. And to the ancient Celts, that's a Greek name from like Aries, Taurus, that's all Greek derived. And if we go to Corona Borealis's Celtic name, that was a goddess, Arianrhod. So they were looking up at the zenith, at the spring equinox, at Arianrhod, and she is the goddess of reincarnation. So we could say that part of the temple could have been associated with reincarnation. And I was Dolores Cannon's guide for many years, and she was a
Oh,
very
wow.
famous regression therapist. I remember having these discussions with Dolores, and she was saying, "Yes, that's amazing that that's been a discovery." So yes, that's gone now. Do you see what I mean? That
Mhm.
star constellation has gone over. But to your next question that you remarked upon, yes, I think it turned to a very masculine, patriarchal society, ruled by men. And we know this because the men in the Bronze Age, that's 4,500 years ago, that were being buried around Stonehenge in round barrows, for example. The prestigious burials were often for males. I mean, there were some very prestigious females, that said, but it was predominantly male. And that's when they widened the avenue. Imagine them, that wall that I said went round, that henge bank that went round, they widened it because it was a lunar site and they made it wider so it would align with the sun at the midsummer sunrise. And that's what Stonehenge is famous for today. But it was preceding that. It was a lunar marker stone, the heel stone, that marked the rise of the moon every 9 years. But today, people don't know that. They go there at the weekend, they'd be there in the thousands. That's what people will be doing at the solstice, Friday, Saturday, over the weekend as well. They'll be watching that sunrise, but originally it was more accurate lunar rise.
Wow. Well, talk more about the elongated skulls because you've made some fantastic discoveries about these elongated skulls. What is the significance? And then, we don't even see this in mainstream, we don't have mainstream knowledge about that this even existed. So maybe even taking a step back about explaining more of what do you mean by these elongated skulls?
Sure. I mean, I came across the elongated skulls of Stonehenge about 10 years ago, so I've had a long study of them and learnt far, far more of late. And I went to Cambridge University because I was studying at Oxford at the time in a Cat's Point system for a degree, as it's called over here, and photographed the skull for evidence. Because I knew if I started talking about elongated skulls with no evidence, people would go, "Oh, yeah, really?" So that was my first introduction, and it was a woman, and it was a woman from Stonehenge, and I felt very privileged to be around this skull. And as my journey through the elongated skull history, the long lost history of these incredible people that erected the first phases of most stone circles and monuments, they were the ones that first tapped into the lays, first tapped into the earth energies. So their wisdom is immense. I realized that they had naturally elongated skulls, so they were natural, and I photographed many of those in my book and my books. And then I realized that some, the elites, and let's say the elite were the queens and the kings, the ruling class, the high priestesses and the high priests, for example, they extended their skulls. So they used cranial deformation to extend them and make them look longer, make them look more pronounced. And we know that they did that because if you do any manipulation to your skull whatsoever, okay, and you're especially making it longer, you have two scars down here. Yeah, and they're quite prominent. It's where probably a board went either side as a common practice amongst ancient people. Then yes, that's what they were doing. When I first discovered them, I just had the skull. I was just photographing skulls. And then after lockdown, for example, and during that period as well, I started to investigate the femur bones. Once you have a femur bone, that's your long bone in your leg. Once you have that, you can estimate the height. And the height of these people were only women about 4 feet 9 and men about 5 feet 4. Very similar to Queen Nefertiti of Egyptian fame, for example. And then studying their skulls closer revealed that their ears were set further back. So this is quite a small civilization with their skulls extended and long anyway, with their ears set back. And so I likened them, weren't they the myth of the Fae, the myth of the fairy folk, for example? And then when I read some of the ancient manuscripts of the Tuatha De Danann from Ireland, they had a battle. These fairy folk, they had a battle, and then they descended into the mounds. Well, where do we find the long skulls? In long barrows, which are mounds. So I think some of the legends, some of the holy history, as I call it, the recorded, the Fae and the giants, because they were very tall people as well. But it wasn't just tall people around at the same time. You had this more mythical looking race. So I think some of the history coming through stems from that time, kind of recalling a lost mythical race that is no longer amid us here today. So I think there are some things in fairy tales and legends that have a grain of truth that needs investigating.
Wow, that is fascinating. So amazing. Now, it stands to reason that your personal past life, you talk about reincarnation with this reincarnation stone. And funnily enough, my next question on the list was about if there's anything that you want to share about what you sense with your personal past life connections with these sites, because you've done so much work, you have so much knowledge with these sites. I wonder if anything has come to you in terms of your own reincarnation history to do with these sites.
Again, it was a blessing working with women, such as Dolores Cannon and others besides, inspirational. I look back and think, how lucky have I been in my career, and God loved their wisdom that still is here today, guiding people. For me, I've had, a few past lives in this area and in ancient Egypt as well. But one that really does stand out, we all have that kind of understanding that there's deja vu out there. You can go somewhere and know the place and feel the place and understand where to go. Well, where Stonehenge is, it's up on a place called the Salisbury Plain. And the Salisbury Plain is likened to your Area 51. It's a no-go place for civilians, and it's where the military of defense have the army bases. Okay, like I say, it's a bit like your Department of Defense, so to speak. And when I was on the Salisbury Plain once, where Stonehenge is, the mythical looking long skulled people, I did have that deja vu. I thought it was really strange. I felt like it was my land. I had been here. I knew where lost sites were. I could turn the corner and know or look over the plain as one is driving along and understand the landscape. And that led me to find lost aspects of Stonehenge. So I've always used a very practical side of my nature, and I've always used archaeology as well, and I can combine rather the kind of mystical with the practical, the left and the right brain together, and that's how I try to investigate ancient sites, but also through my heart, where I feel guided to go, and by the women of the past that I believe guide me, because when I first met the long-skulled woman of Stonehenge at Cambridge University, it's very emotional to be around someone that is 5,500 years old, that looks different to you and I. And I remember the curator had left, and I gently put my hands near to her throat chakra and said that I would be your voice for your long lost people. And then I gently put my hand close to the third eye and said, show me, I will be your seer for your people. I will show people. And then I've always said for interviews that when I put my hand over her extended skull, it was like two pulse points for her crown chakra. So perhaps they had two crown chakras. At the end of the day, I just wanted to be her voice. Yeah.
Mm.
For her people that had this lost and magical history that nobody else was talking about. And I always find it very poignant that a woman from the past connected to a woman of today, because I believe that she guided me to do my books, to show me places I'd never have gone. Yeah, that I
Yeah.
was guided to go to. And still today, I believe guides me. And even though her very long barrow, that's where she was interned, place to rest, is on the edge of the Salisbury Plain, whenever I can, I go there to honor her and her people.
That's beautiful. And I want to talk about the Longboroughs, but really quickly, is this the woman whose skull was in the Cambridge like research library, but in like locked in a cabinet or something? Is this the
They're,
same?
they're in cardboard boxes. I mean, you
Okay.
think that you're talking about Cambridge University, world famous for being one of the leading universities in the world. And yes, you're in a controlled environment in temperature density and moisture density. It's a very modern unit, but it's still, at the end of the day, they're in cardboard boxes. And I actually don't think that Cambridge realizes what they've got in their collection, because when I looked at the ticket to see the last time that skull had been viewed, I was shocked to think it was in the 1930s. So that she hadn't been seen until I requested that could I, literally have time with this ancient being. So yes, so I don't think they know what they've got. And opposite the Stonehenge section, on one side of the wall, was the Abydos Egyptian skulls. And if they hadn't been seen, if the skull I looked at hadn't been seen since the 1930s, when were these last seen? So, sometimes I think there's a little bit of conspiracy into it, and sometimes I think there's lack of human resources to catalogue and reinvestigate these skulls.
Wow, that is so fascinating. Well, let's talk about the Longboroughs that you found, the mounds and the Longboroughs. What is the significance? Because I know that the kind of common understanding is that these were burial sites, but I know that you have found something different. So please share.
Yes. Well, for those viewers and listeners that don't know what a long barrow is, if you imagine that some have megalithic chambers that you can enter, a little bit like caves or an internal megalithic room, for want of a better explanation. And then it's all earth. So they're long in shape, they're elongated in shape, and you can enter some of them. And that's what is a kind of healing aspect in the land, because some of those chambers, those rooms, in other words, they were set above spiral healing earth energy patterns. And it's also been noted by other researchers that they have strong acoustic properties as well. So they have more than one thing going on, so to speak. And they, after that, was like their phase one. Think of them as temples, think of them as shrines, think about them as healing places. And I wouldn't like to count, Cara, I've taken hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people inside numerous long barrows, and everybody feels a sense of calm. Some feel healing, some hear voices. It heightens your perception as well, and kind of like gently opens the third eye. So I see them as being far more than burial. That was their first phase. In the ancient world, everything had its phases. And then after that, they became used for burial deposits, normally the skull, the long bones, and sometimes a whole body. But if we go back to their original purpose, then they would definitely be acoustic healing centers. And some of them were aligned to stars as well. So you'd have like the Pleiades, some aligned to Arcturus, Cygnus. There's many different constellations that have been recorded by archaeoastronomers. So they're star temples as well, activated when those stars align to them. For example, I'm going to take you to Ireland now. Ireland's a wonderful place, and we're not far from a town called Sligo on the west coast of Ireland. And on top of a hill, you have what they call cairns. We would call them barrows, and they're round and they're very quartz-like on the inside. And they're in a W shape across the top of this large hill or mountain. And every winter solstice, when it was in full alignment, those chambers would align to Cassiopeia, the constellation of Cassiopeia. All of those cairns in that W shape being activated by Cassiopeia. And if we look to the Celtic equivalent of Cassiopeia, again, we've got a Greek zodiac that we've inherited. And if we make that a Celtic zodiac, then Cassiopeia equates to the great earth goddess Dawn. So at the winter solstice, all of those star chambers have that starlight entering them. So again, they're star chambers, they're healing chambers, they're acoustic chambers, they're multifaceted, depending on how we would like to work with them. But ultimately, most of them are feminine. They're aligned to the moon or to stars.
Oh, wow. Well, it makes me think too, like in Egypt, how there's a theory about the initiation, that they were initiation temples, or that was part of the use, and that initiates would start at one and then slowly graduate to the next one and the next one, and it was to do with adapting their frequency. It makes me think that that might be a possibility, maybe too, with these.
Absolutely, that's what I mean about being multifaceted. They're
Hmm.
not being used for one thing at one time of the year. So if we look to initiation, the time when you want to have them as a learning place, for example, then particular times of the year they have a different energy and a different frequency. So if we went to long barrow at the winter solstice, it might have a completely different energy than its opposite at the summer solstice. And what I've noticed about standing stones, because a lot of them are megalithic, Egyptian temples have large pillars for example, then those standing stones, and I put my finger up and say that's a standing stone. If you imagine that they ripple out concentric circles, a bit like when you throw a pebble into water, you see those concentric circles, don't you, of water ripples. That's what standing stones do. They give off these ripples in the landscape, or a column might do, one or two columns in a temple might do that. Each one of those ripples I've measured in terms of sound frequency, and they have different frequencies. So if you're on one frequency of a standing stone, that could be 133 hertz, I've recorded. Well, some people would say that's very good for the throat, for throat chakra. Is it there that they stood upon to speak to the congregation, to the people, that the participants? Could it heal that area? And then if we're on another type of energy, for example, it can peak at around 238 hertz, which is a healing frequency. And I've looked and measured these different frequencies. So I think where the initiate stood, I'm going to take it even deeper now, rather than just being in the temple for initiation, where you stand in that temple can activate particular qualities within your consciousness. I have proved by the ripples of the standing stone. So again, it's kind of looking at a place and then going deeper and deeper. And as a modern day woman living in a modern day world, but entering ancestral sites, I know, Cara, we're on catch up to what the ancients had. Okay, so it's I don't ever think one author has all the answers anyway, and we kind of all write our chapters, and together we're making one giant book, and hopefully an encyclopedia for people to read. So yes, I'm really looking at sites much deeper now, and saying where you are in a site will definitely influence your consciousness. And one frequency emitted by one of those ripples I described can actually encourage uh, damaged DNA to be repaired. That's its healing frequency. So going from the
Wow.
sound to speaking to healing, do you see what I mean? It's
Yeah.
That's what the ancients knew. They were so advanced in their temples that it wasn't just going from one temple to another, it was where you were in that temple, I would argue.
Yes, that makes so much sense and it's fascinating. And you talk about how there, depending on what time of the year that you're there too, that it's a totally different energy. Is it correct also that depending on the time of the day, like do they kind of sleep these sites? Like is the energy lower at night and more amplified at dawn? Have you found anything like that?
Yeah, that's a great question actually, because yes, when we factor in what the ancients spoke about in terms of planetary hours, for instance, they wrote them down and said, on Sunday, the first hour of sunlight is dedicated to the sun, and so on and so forth. They're called planetary hours, and people interested can Google that in their own time. So yes, when everything comes into sync. So let's, for example, we've got a lunar orientated temple, yeah, and a stone happens to be in that path. That's an alignment, okay. And then we go there on Monday, Moon Day, in the first hour of the moon. We're coming into sync with everything. Do you see what I mean? It's
Mm.
sympathetic magic. That's what that's called. And we can synchronize to that to enhance the experience even more. But even if I went on a Sunday and I'm not in the planetary hour, and I'm just enjoying that space, I'm going to get something from that anyway. Okay, that's what we've recorded. But I think if you're like the magicians of old and the priesthood of old, they would have been looking deeper and deeper and deeper into several different aspects of how to experience energies at particular times in the day, particular times of the year, when the veil between this world and the next is thinnest. Like we're coming up to the summer solstice. That's a day when the veil is getting quite thin between this world and the next. And then we have 3 days after the solstice, we have Midsummer's Day. And quite a few people get that confused. They call the summer solstice Midsummer's Day. It's actually 3 days later, when the sun starts to move down. It's reached its most northerly. 3 days later, it will start to move south and, draw in autumn and draw in winter. So, yes, I think all of the sites were aligned to harness that particular type of energy. For sure. So it could be sun, moon, star, earth energy. Weave all that together in your cauldron of wisdom, and you've got a mighty formula.
Wow, it's so I mean, it even puts like multidimensionality like in a different frame of reference. It's like it's so genius. And like the point you made about this was in antiquity, and we, from a mainstream perspective, we tend to think like we've just gotten more technologically advanced and smarter. And like you say, it's like we are playing catch up, and it feels like it's going to take us a long time to be able to really understand just how much was going on. I mean, even in this 1 hour that we've been talking, so much has been revealed about what really is happening on so many different levels. Like you say, the sound aspect, the chakra aspect, the frequency aspect, the DNA, all of this, the stars, the moon, the sun, the time of year, the time of day, it just keeps going. It's like, what does it not? It's that might be the better question. What what can we say is not, involved in these sites? What have they not taken into account? Because it just seems like they've taken into account everything in the natural world, you know?
I think they have. I really do because they have. I did a course the other day with the UK's top sacred geometrist because we don't have time to go into that now, but I've done all the sacred geometry of Stonehenge and even the angle of the stones that equate to maths and music and sound, for example. So yes, they've got sacred geometry. Let's put another layer on top of it. They've got
Right.
sacred geometry. The angle of the stones means something. You know, where we are in the monument means something. So, what I admire so much about the ancestors, they were master dowsers, master astronomers, master mathematics, and the list goes on, geometrists. All of that they created for themselves and for us today. Because we're still experiencing these sites. This is their legacy that we are interacting with. It is their original temple. So as a druid, when I go to an ancient site, I always ask the spirit of place for permission to enter, the guardian of place permission to enter, and the ancestors old. And I think, even if you just go in there radiating love, happiness, joy, the site will accept you.
Mm.
And that's what I think. As long as we go into an ancient site with love and an open mind and that wonder of what is the monument going to reveal, because even though I've written books about Avebury and I'm writing one about Egypt at the moment and Stonehenge, one thing I do know, Cara, is they still have their secrets old. They still have their mysteries old, and they cherry pick, I believe, who they're going to communicate to. And you could be in Ohio, you could be where I am. If an ancient site and the ancestors reach out, they reach out to those with the ears that want to listen and to the heart that wants to hold their space and recall the past through their words.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Wow. Well, let's talk about Malta because I know that there are a lot of tunnels in Malta. I've been in one of the tunnels in Malta, which when I went, I think we had a guided tour into this. It went on forever, and they said, or whatever, whether it was written, now I can't even remember if it was a written document that I was reading or if it was I think it was a guided tour. They were saying it was constructed for World War II protection. And I was like, how is that possible? How did they create this in that short of a time? Because it just went on forever. And
Mhm.
so I wonder if that's not accurate. But what are you interested in Malta, and what can you tell us about the ancient sites there?
Malta is absolutely incredible. It's a very small island, about 12 miles by 12 miles, with another island called Gozo at the top.
That's where
It's
I
very,
stayed, Gozo.
yeah, Gozo is absolutely beautiful. It's like old Malta. It really is. And all of the ancient sites there are dedicated to the goddess. And the goddess is portrayed as being very voluptuous there. She's got big childbearing hips and usually very large breasts as well. And she dominates temples. And in Old Maltese language, that is, Old Maltese language, there was no word for father. It was all goddess energy. So what I love about Malta is you're going to these ancient sites, temples that as a woman of today, for example, it's like talking about initiation earlier, it's like initiation into the divine feminine and for men alike. Yeah, I'm not just saying, it's an all woman temple by no stretch of the imagination. So yes, you have these wonderful temples, but my favorite temple is called the Hypogeum. And you're talking about tunnels, Cara. The Hypogeum was carved out of the solid limestone bedrock with exquisite carving. Google this, listeners and viewers, because the carving is exquisite. And it's on three levels going down. So it's down a couple of stories into the chalk bedrock with chambers, rooms. We call them chambers as archaeologists. I'm going to say rooms. It keeps it simple and gets the visualization going better. So there's all these rooms on different levels, one of which is called the oracle chamber. And if I were in the oracle chamber, and let's say I said, Maria, it would echo in every single room. Maria, 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 Maria,
Really?
Maria, 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 throughout this underground sensory deprivation temple. Okay, so
Wow.
that's my favorite place, and I'll be leading a tour there on September the 16th to 22nd, and it's a budget tour, making it affordable to most people. Okay, it's probably going to be the last budget tour that I do. But more than that as well, you're mentioning about underground complexes. If we just call it a complex rather than a tunnel system, then I think if the ancients could carve that temple, yeah, and have its sound resonance throughout, then that isn't the only one. And what I suggest that your tour guide or pamphlet or guidebook, whatever you got that information from, and I've been into some of the tunnel system, but I don't want to say it's the same one as you because I think there's several, so to speak, then I think they were reused. Now, if you're going to, the Second World War, tragic time, fearful time, Malta was, in occupation, you would want to have defense from the enemy, especially in the Mediterranean. And I think they were reused because in England, London, well, not far from London, in a place called Essex, you have Chislehurst Caves. They're a cave system, a natural cave system, but which has been dug out as well in antiquity. That was reused in the Second World War as an air raid shelter. But here's the thing that was discovered when they were reusing that particular place, they found that they had miraculous healing because those chambers were above earth energy. And it was reported on the wireless in the 1950s that people had these healing experiences. So a dowser, whose legacy archive I've inherited, he went there and doused, obviously, and found all of these healing earth energies, feminine healing earth energies. So what I suggest about the tunnel systems in places, in part, is they are healing under earth sanctuaries, sensory deprivation to heal your medical conditions or whatever mental conditions. Mental health was improved as well in Chislehurst Cave. So again, we're looking at a multifaceted use of tunnel systems from antiquity to healing experiences in the Second World War to being reused in the Second World War.
That is so fascinating. If I remember correctly, when I was in Malta too on the beach, I think there were a lot of caves around there too. Is that correct?
Yes, because you're in limestone. If you're in particular geological areas, for instance, you are going to get a lot of caves, okay? And that's limestone. And we also have limestone on the Giza Plateau of Egyptian fame, and you have cave systems on the Giza Plateau as well, as in any limestone environment, if you see what I'm saying. And the ancients would have looked at one cave system and go, okay, the earth energies turning to the right through that, and they put it to the right. So some of them are following earth currents or earth energies in the landscape. That's their genius. So we could walk in there and think, oh, this is just a tunnel. Yeah, as they did when they were refugees in the Second World War, losing their houses, living in Chislehurst Cave, and then suddenly saying, whoa, my toothache has been healed. My heart condition is getting better. So unbeknown to them, they were in an earth energy enhancement location.
Wow. Well, you're also, in addition to Malta this year, next year you're going to go to Chaco Canyon, New Mexico. I don't know
Mm.
a lot about Chaco Canyon, but I had a dream a couple of years ago, and a friend of mine was in this dream. So I shared the dream with her. And I was like, it was this, we were in this rocky, like kind of canyony place, but it wasn't because I've been to Sedona many times with this friend. And I was like, but it wasn't red rocks. They were like yellow, sandy colored rocks. And I described what was happening, and there was a portal there. Like people, I think somebody disappeared. Like, could you cross this threshold? And but it was out in the open anyway. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, I've been meaning to tell you. I watched this documentary on Chaco Canyon, and it sounds like what you're saying." And I'm like, "What's Chaco Canyon?" So anyway, she and I, because she had just seen this documentary and had been wanting to talk to me about it to see what I knew about Chaco Canyon. And then I had this dream and I didn't know about Chaco Canyon. So we feel called there. But that's really, I don't know a lot about it. So what has drawn you there?
Well, what drew me there was For instance, I was listening to an archaeologist because I've studied archaeology at Oxford and Bath Uni, and I was listening to a lecture on a place in America. And I love ancient America because I've been to loads and loads of sites there. I was at America's Stonehenge last month, leading a tour there
Where is
to
that?
America's Stonehenge. It's about 40 minutes from Boston.
Really?
Fantastic site. Yeah,
I've never heard
yeah.
of it.
Yeah, I know it's sold out because no, that's what everybody says, Cara. I've never
Yeah.
heard of it. And I'll tell you about that in a moment because it's got an amazing megalithic feature akin to the Hypogeum Oracle Room. Okay. But Chaco Canyon, I was listening to a lecture and he was talking about this Great North Road. And this Great North Road goes way up to Aztec ruins and beyond. That's associated with Chaco Canyon. It's beautiful, goes down. So imagine a Great North Road that comes down that was all made to look white with white clay. Yeah, so it would stand out by day or by night. And then the road went down to the south to places near Mexico. So you have this massive line. Well, my ears went, woo, ley line. Yeah, you've got a ley line coming down, but you're calling it the Great North Road because it was in part used only in part as a road. What archaeologists noticed, it was over engineered and underused. So people weren't necessarily walking that all the time. Yeah, it was underused. And then when I looked at these sites either side, we have the idea in the UK that you have a ley line, straight line, but in weaving in and out of that, like a caduceus, like a strand of DNA, you have a female current and a male current. That's a ley system. And Chaco Canyon, I discovered, had that. So Chaco Canyon is a D-shaped large building called Pueblo Bonito, meaning beautiful city by the Spanish. And it's a D-shaped. Why a D-shape? Well, you have that in an earth energy pattern. Precise, yeah, and it became a template. But Chaco Canyon, Pueblo Bonito, that building within Chaco, had up to 800 rooms, up to 4 stories high. It was the largest building before the people started building Chicago skyscrapers and Boston large skyscrapers. So it was one of the tallest buildings in ancient America. Okay, near in New Mexico, but that was just one house. There was 12 great houses, okay, that were like Pueblo Bonito, containing hundreds of rooms. Yeah, and it was beautifully, the masonry was absolutely beautiful. Well, 12, you could liken that to the 12 signs of the zodiac. You could liken it to, the sacred number 12. And all of them associated with lines, solar alignments, lunar alignments. And just north of that, I mentioned Aztec ruins. Aztec ruins is absolutely amazing sight, and it's very much like Chaco Canyon, Pueblo Bonito, but it's got a reconstructed kiva, and a kiva means a sacred circular area that is underground, and then it has certain features in it, but then it would have a roof, and you'd enter it through the roof and you'd come down, and it's a reconstructed one. So it shows you how the ancients, the ancestors of the Hopi and Pueblo peoples around that area lived. So it's their heritage, but they were not nomadic. They built these permanent structures, and they imported turquoise and made fantastic outfits. And some of the shaman there in my research has shown that they had 6 fingers and 6 toes, because in certain rooms in Pueblo Bonito, you've got handprints, footprints. So they were probably seen as being, the seers, the prophets of place. So I think part of Pueblo Bonito within Chaco was about prophecy. Okay, then you can go all the way down south to Culiacan, in Mexico, and all of these places are linked. So when we look at Chaco Canyon, we see just Chaco and the 12 great houses, but it's on a huge lane that links to the north and to the south alike.
Wow. Oh, that's amazing. So you're going there next year?
I plan to return to Chaco because I discovered where the male current goes and the female current. And over here, we tend to name them after gods or saints, like Mary and Michael
Mhm.
associated to LA, and others besides Catherine and Peter. And of course, you can't project that onto an American landscape. So I thought, we went into meditation and came up with wolf and deer. And when I looked into one interpretation of Chaco, what does Chaco mean? One interpretation, there are many, said it was hunting ground. And I think like they weave in and out of all of these ancient sites. So we can go in the actual buildings and follow the male current throughout the building and look at all of these amazing earth energies that are associated with the kivas, with the particular shapes of stone that you have at Chaco. They're called T doors because they're like a letter T. And that is an indication of what sort of energy is found therein. So I was kind of decoding the the architecture as well as the currents, and the two began to match. So whenever you see one thing, whether it's further north in Colorado at Spruce House, that's another very large Pueblo building into a cliff face. It's a cliff face, cliff dwelling house. You see these T doors. You go down to Pacume in Mexico, you see the T door. Well, why are all these cultures using the T? It marks a particular path of an earth energy flow.
Wow. Well, what were you going to share about the American Stonehenge?
Ah, yes, America's Stonehenge. I was there with a wonderful group of beautiful, beautiful people like yourself. It was a pleasure to be there. Okay, imagine, like I was talking about earlier, that you have these megalithic stone rooms, chambers. Okay, so we're going to go inside one now in America's Stonehenge, and it's called the Oracle Room, and it has a little bit of a kind of like cut out hole tube section through the stone. Do you see what I mean? So I can see daylight
Mhm.
in a small hole through it. And just beyond that, by several meters, yeah, say about 15 feet or so, because you use imperial. Then there's this amazing looking megalith. It's flat like a table. It has a carved rim going around it. And I don't agree with this name at all. The owners call it the sacrificial table. It has nothing to do with sacrifice. Has a beautiful healing earth energy sited beneath it. And I found in Wales, in the British Isles, an identical stone to it that was used for healing.
Is that
Okay.
called a dolmen or is it different?
No, it's like a dolmen is two stones with one on top, or a four supporting stones and one on top. No, it's like a little bit like a stone table. Yeah,
Okay.
literally,
Hmm.
but it's carved. And I found an identical healing stone in the British Isles, documented that it was for healing, next to a spring well. Okay, so that's in Wales. And I thought, well, that looks identical to that one. And people can see my article on my website about America's Stonehenge. Okay, they're the features. You've got the Oracle Room, and you've got I called it the altar stone, or as they call it, the sacrificial table. Altar stone is more appropriate. And if you're in the Oracle Room, and again, I'm going, Cara, like that through, or saying a name, or saying healing, or sound toning, or drumming, or whatever I want to do, then that sound that I'm making in the Oracle Room comes up from the altar table. Yeah, comes up through it. And that is normally off grounds to the average person, but I get private access. I've got a very good working relationship with the owners of America's Stonehenge. You can get access to that private access as well, I believe. I don't want to say that that's 100% correct, because it may or may not, but it's a really good feature which introduces sound to healing. And so I got permission for people to lie on it as a sound toning. And people were saying they were having a wonderful experience. And it baffles the owner and the archaeologist. Why is there a small well by it when it's right by a kind of swampy area? Because that's what they were doing in Wales. They were taking the water from the well, putting it around the rim, and making healing water. And they dedicated it in Wales to Saint Canna. She was a woman healing saint at that time, but they're identical. They're literally near enough one and the same. So I think that was the healing altar, and I think it was for initiation, sound as well at particular times of the year. And there's lots of outlying stones. And in America, you have a phenomenon called serpentine walls, and some of the serpentine walls can go on for like 2,500 feet
Wow.
around, yeah, around America's Stonehenge. But like, the ancient symbol of the snake that has its tail in its mouth, yeah, we kind of can visualize that. It has that going round America's Stonehenge, yeah. And then you see this carving like a snake's face with the tail in it. And again, it baffled the owners and archaeologists. Why is this one site slightly away from the main complex of the oracle room? And I know, I've been taught by master dowsers worldwide, that one place is always outside of the main monument. Why? Because it's where it cleanses your aura, where it cleanses your energy field, so you don't take your emotional baggage in the site with you, so that you become more perceptive to the energies therein. And when I doused that there, it was apparent that that was a cleansing area, just like you get at Karnak Temple, just like you get at Catholic churches, because it was a Catholic clerk that told me that about one of their secrets of the Catholic churches, just like you get at Stonehenge and Avebury alike. So yes, it's many wonders at Chaco Canyon and America's Stonehenge.
Wow. It's so fascinating. All of this has just been incredible, just fantastic. Thank you so much, Maria. Please tell us how people can find out more about your work and your books and your upcoming projects and events.
Absolutely, because I'm holding a Stonehenge retreat as well that's on my website that people might like to join. That's this early September, and Malta in mid-September. People can find out more about me by going to the Avebury experience. That's Avebury, the Avebury experience.co.uk, or go to esotericcollege.com, and that has my email on it. So they're my two websites, the aveburyexperience.co.uk and esotericcollege.com.
Thank you so much, Maria. I'm so honored to have you here today. Thank you.
You've been great company, and thanks for inviting me. It's been a great show. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Soul Elevation. If someone in your life would be inspired or uplifted by what you heard today, please take a moment to share it with them. These are the kinds of conversations that ripple out and elevate collective consciousness. And if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the powerful episodes ahead. Your presence, your energy, and your support truly help amplify this mission of raising frequency and anchoring in a more awakened humanity. Until next time, stay elevated and keep shining your light.